Today we're going to talk about the 7 steps to demystify demand and portfolio management. It is Tuesday, the 22nd of February 2022, beautiful date, and invited by IT Service Management Belgium. The key message for tonight is, and let me make it a little bit bigger, if you want to have a coherent portfolio for your whole enterprise, you need also an enterprise service management architecture, which is basically a set of rules and guidelines to make sure that you can do your decisions in a consistent way and that you are managing not your applications, no, your whole services. And that's also one of the things that I'm going to explain is what do we understand with a service, and also why it is so important to do it from an enterprise perspective, having a shared goal. Because if you are all doing your work from your own island, from your own department, your own way of talking and working, you need to have expensive bridges and translators to do something together. So what I share tonight is also part of my personal journey. I've been active in the airline industry. That was, I think, the first 10 years exactly of my career. And I worked on the business side, marketing, HR, but also on the IT side. And I've seen how perfectly they can work not together. They had their own language set, their own way of doing, and you need to find a way how to move closer to each other. And even when I was working in the consulting business, CDG, where I learned the Belgian market, but also for Quint Wellington Redwood, where we did fantastic work with blueprints, sourcing strategy. We also learned a lot of organizations how to use the processes that were offered in the ITIL courses. But today, for the past 10 years, when I'm active as managing partner in Begrip, behavior becomes a much bigger part of the way that we implement not only processes but also workflows to get in control of your services. So, as I mentioned, the agenda of tonight is also filled up with elements related to high experience to implement service management in organizations. So the first part is a kind of foundation that I would like to start with to make you familiar with a couple of beautiful building blocks that comes from Unified Service Management, originally written by Jan van Boom. And from there I will move on with the steps 2 until 7, explaining how important it is to agree on definitions. But also you need to be aware of the impact of the tooling world. Your suppliers, they can bring in different wording, different meaning, which can easily mix up the definitions that you are running or having in your own organization. How can you use ITIL, especially ITIL 4? There are beautiful practices over there, but how can I map it and integrate it in my portfolio demand management? And then we will move on with funnel management. We will learn also how important it is to set criteria, to use categories in a smart way. And from there, we go to step number 6, create routines and learn the new behavior. And if you have done it in this order, you can set up your portfolio and start to make releases per year. But how is it? How does it look like if I show you the whole agenda? And as I promised, I would start with the first building block. And and maybe I should make it a little bit bigger so you can read it easily. What is a service? Maybe it's important to start with that one first. And what I share with you is a couple of interactions that we had with the audience. And I will show the picture over here as well. So those that want to give a response, let me share with you the Menti. And okay, thank you. And this is what you see. So what do we have on the screen? Value for the customer, delivery value, facilitating someone to deliver a need, but also ondersteunende voorziening, a supported facility in English and Dutch, both. Okay, thank you. The first building block is all about the service. And what you see here, let me make it a little bit bigger, is the transaction between a customer and the service provider. But if you zoom into the picture, it's an interaction between demand and the facility. So the facility is a part of the service that you offer, but there is more, because if something goes wrong or if you have a question, you would like to have the ability to be able to ask for support. So a service is not only the facility, a combination of goods and actions. No, there is also support included. So if you want to go to maybe the shortest description of what is a service, well, what about a service is a supported facility? And of course, during the Unified Service Management training, we go a bit more in depth, talking about the functionality and functioning part of the facility, and the same, of course, from a support perspective. You will see the difference of the goods and the service actions, direct and indirect services, but that's for in the Unified Service Management training. Another thing that I have in mind to share with you, and then let me go to the flip over and show you what I've prepared over here. Those that are trained in Unified Service Management, they recognize the 5 processes. If you are more familiar with ITIL, do you recognize, for example, the process agree or service level management over there? Change enablement or incident management, mentioned over here, recover, the activity that you need to do to recover a service. So basically, Unified Service Management is making use of 5 fundamental or key processes. Operate is a very good one that they added in the Unified Service Management process model, because you need to have a place to be sure that the services that you have agreed to deliver, that you're able to operate them, that you're able to monitor them. And so that's what's standard over here. And on the other side of the model, you have the improve part, which basically means anything that you do as a proactive action. It could be that there are repetitive incidents going on in your recovery process, and like that you do with problem management, that you do an improvement action from this angle, or an innovation, or would like to do some risk mitigation. That's all done through the process improve. So on this side, we have the customer and also the triggers over here that will activate workflow 1, workflow 2, 3 and 4, and workflow 5. How? Well, for example, a wish will trigger workflow 1, which will transform a wish into an agreement. During the training, you will see the whole workflow. You can also look on the portal, usm-portal.com, where you can find more information about these 8 workflows. The second one is related to a request for change, where you already have an agreement, and part of the agreement is that a user can, for example, come with a specific change in the infrastructure, which is managed by you as a service provider. Recovery can be done or with a change if something needs to be updated in the infrastructure, or can directly be executed by those that are working as an operator in the operate process. All the service requests can easily be resolved by, all the service requests can easily be solved. No, all the service requests can easily be fulfilled, that's the word, by a very quick workflow. It just comes in, you plan it, you execute it, and the service request has been done. Workflow 6, 7 and 8, that are the workflows that are the proactive input from the process model. You can do on top level that you make a change or an update in your contract. You can even change it from a supplier perspective, or within the contract that you change something in the infrastructure, or as an improvement action that goes directly to the operator to execute it. 5 processes, 8 workflows, beautiful service building block that I would like to promote, to learn and to explain you. And let me bring you over here, because I have the same slide prepared and then it looks like this. So you have to trigger on the left side, which will initiate a wish, a request for change, an incident, or a service request. And from there, you will see that the workflow, as demonstrated over here, will be activated. So it goes through the activities in the blue box on the top. It goes to the activity through change, and it even goes to the one at the lowest layer, the green one, where the operate is demonstrated. Go back to change. Why? Because you want to close the change. You want to make an update in your managed infrastructure database, and of course you need to accomplish the wish into a service level agreement. And the same is possible from an internal perspective, where you have the workflow from the orange process improve, where you can make an update in the agreement on top level. How does it look like? If you look at this workflow with all the activities in a row, well, that's how it looks like. And during the course, we have also the other workflows prepared for you to make you familiar with those building blocks, 5 processes, 8 workflows. And it ended up all in this picture. This is the USM, Unified Service Management Customer Provider Interaction Model. You recognize already the customer, the provider, and the service as an interaction with the demand. But if I zoom into the provider part, you see process, people, and technology. That's not so new, because for those that are trained in ITIL, and let me put it next to the slide over here, you'll recognize the 4 dimensions. And also there, they talk about process, people, and technology. The only difference is, in ITIL, they make a difference between internal and external, partner and suppliers, and organizations and people. But it's just the same, the 3 resources. If you follow the Unified Service Management course, we also go in depth, talking about the difference between process and line management. Think about specify versus realize, and also how you manage and coordinate those activities in your organization. But the most beautiful one that I really would like to share with you, that's the slide over here. Having the 3 resources in mind, talking about process, people, and technology, from the what, I mean the activities, you go to the process itself, of course, the 5 processes in the process model. But if you combine this activity with who is going to do this activity, then you're creating a procedure, very powerful. And also if you add how the person is doing this action, you are on work instruction level. And that's one of the things that I am really fond of in this picture, because there are so many organizations mixing up process, procedure, work instruction. And for example, ITIL 4 brings a lot of good practices that can help you with the work instructions. But remember, procedures derive from a process in combination with who. And if you add the work instructions in a more precise way by telling how someone is doing it, then you have very practical routines for your organization. So it all starts with processes, and not from here, because you see so many people starting from the practice point of view. And I will explain later on in one of the steps where I talk about ITIL why it can be a bit confusing if you start from there. So 2 core definitions that I learn people when we do the Unified Service Management course is we explain the service management architecture and the foundation, the service management system, which is basically the 3 resources that you manage to deliver the service efficiently and effectively. Okay, and then I will come back to the next agenda point, where I would like to focus on agree on the definitions in your wording. There is an interactive part during the workshop. I will skip it now while we are doing this session. The question that I was asking everybody is all about what is portfolio management in your organization? And then I see so many different definitions, or even that they say we don't have a definition in our organization. Portfolio management is all about your selection and prioritization to be in control of your organization's program and projects. It's good to have it in line, of course, with your strategic objectives, and that you are aware of the capacity that you have to be able to deliver it. The whole goal of portfolio management is doing this balancing act so that you're able to figure out what you can implement from a change perspective, and also that you have taken into account the maintenance activities that you need to do to run the business as usual. If you look at the definition from ITIL perspective, it's the purpose of portfolio management practice to ensure that the organization has the right mix of programs, projects, products, and services to implement the organization's strategy. Okay, when is something for portfolio management? I learned when I demonstrate the flip over, I learned you already to familiarize with a couple of triggers. And in the slide over here, I come back to those triggers like the service request or the request for change. But the ones that are interesting for portfolio management are the large changes, those that take a lot of resources, complex from a technology point of view, perfectly fitting with a strategy, but also if you have ideas and wishes that you would like to fulfill and not part of a current agreement, but you would like to bring it in the portfolio. And if it is too innovative, well, you need to bring it to your board of directors. Maybe it could be a nice input for the strategy in the near future. So if you have this graph in front of you, you have your enterprise strategy splitting up in business strategy, and you do your portfolio management in the middle to run your programs and projects in your organization next to the other services that you would like to offer. So keep in mind that it's all about creating a shared goal, having the focus that you want to do something for the whole organization. And it only works if you all agree on terminology, that you understand what you mean with a program, with a project, with a service, and then it makes sense to let it work. Let me see. Step number 3 is, if you have your naming and your definition done in your organization, be aware of the terminology that is used today in the tooling. And for example, if I show you this graph, in Topdesk, they talk about contract and SLA management. They use the term problem management. You can also change that if you go to the taxonomy of your application and put in the wording that you like to use. The same for ServiceNow. Instead of portfolio demand, they also have the word of idea that they put before demand. I like the idea, to have the idea, so that you use that as a kind of funnel to make it rich before it becomes a wish as input for your portfolio management. But all these steps make clear how it works for your organization. If I look at OmniTracker, they talk about availability and capacity management, service level management, good input for running your portfolio management. So it all is about synchronizing your tool with your world and not the other way around. So create one central place where you can put all these definitions out there, and so that people easily learn what the common understanding is, and take a look at the usmportal.com, because there is already good material over there available. So that was about the influence of tooling. And if I move to step number 4, then we are talking about ITIL. What brings ITIL with all those practices? Well, it's a bit overwhelming. If you look at ITIL, there are even 15 practices, knowing that there are 34 practices in total. So almost half of the practices are related to demand and portfolio management. And if you look at, for example, the service value system, it starts with demand. If you go to the service value chain, it starts with demand. If you go to the value stream, also there, it starts with demand. But it is not telling exactly which workflow need to be activated related to which type of trigger. And I will come back to that when we're talking about step number 6. There are some other good practical pictures if you go through the item 4 material. For example, the customer journey model, item 4, the digital product lifecycle in item 4. But what I do when I provide a training, I explain people, look, if you have the 5 key processes of unified service management, use all those beautiful practices and link the ones that you want to use with, for example, the process change and or the process improve. And that's far more helpful than being overwhelmed by the number of practices that you see today. Okay, let me move back to the agenda. And where are we now? Step number 5. Step number 5 is all about funnel management. And what is the idea behind funnel management? Think about, for example, to create one funnel with, I like to call it the ideas, where you can brainstorm, put things in there and discuss with people from other departments to make it explicit what you're looking for, what you need, and you can enrich them with a couple of criteria so that you can do a kind of ranking. And from there, you can say, okay, now it became a wish. And we bring it into the portfolio of our IT organization, for example. And from there, we are running a couple of projects. And from there, we are running a couple of projects. But why are we so good in being too late? And then I'm talking about this picture where you see that in all the islands or departments in organizations, everybody is making their own funnel. And that makes it so complicated. So those ideas become wishes, sometimes are even already projects. There are people that bought already or made contracts with external parties to integrate and test already some applications, and before you know, you are already far too late to be able to include other people and competences in your organization. So what is the idea? Create one centralized funnel where you have the ideas, the funnel of wishes, and then start to create a funnel of minimum viable services. That's one of the key cornerstones to create in your whole enterprise. And from there, it's important to learn the organization, what you can do to avoid that it becomes confusing. For example, if I show you this picture, then you see that this organization had definitions like technical debt, features, defects, risk, innovation, compliance, security. Well, it only works if you define together what it is, or that you start to create a couple of categories and subcategories where you can say, for example, innovation is a part of the category risk, the same with problem and defect. And what I really like to recommend to do is, if you want to have, for example, over the 340 possibilities, think about working with 7 main categories, then take one main category and give it 7 categories behind it, and maybe even 7 subcategories. And in this structure, you have a lot of possibilities to do your classification to support your portfolio management. And then it can be a very helpful way, not only for the IT organization, but also for HR, for marketing, for any department in your enterprise to be able to run your portfolio management. Let's go back to the agenda and see what we have in mind if we talk about step number 6. Step number 6 is all about how do we create standardized routines and learn this new behavior. Well, talking about routines, that means that we need to go back to the unified service management model and look at the different triggers. So we had a trigger on the customer side, generating wishes, but also big changes and but also from the internal side, you have it. So if you look at this picture, you can say, okay, the trigger wish and request for change, that is the main input for our portfolio management. And in the portfolio management, where we transfer these wish into future agreements, we have several steps. After accepting the wish, we do our classification, we specify what people have in mind regarding the portfolio. Maybe you need to do a draft offer, negotiate, and then you start to realize it. And each step can be a whole project on its own. And remember, it has all to do with this beautiful workflow where you see all the standard activities that needs to be done, or if it is not necessary, you can skip one of the activities, but it brings in a logical flow, a logical order of things that needs to be done to run your portfolio. Also the behavioral aspect in this step. Learn people to get familiarized with the activities related into this workflow. There are several ways to do. You can even use gamification, that people understand to recognize a trigger and immediately know which workflow they need to put in place to make it happen. Because it's quite confusing for a lot of people in the organizations to see the difference between a service request, a request for change, is it an incident or is it a wish? So learn and train and practice so that people get familiarized with it, and that you can also say, for all the wishes out there, we have one workflow. This is what we need to do. Stick to that workflow, which, for example, ends in a meeting where you sit together with several people from the business to clarify based on, and that's step number 7 that I have in mind. Let me show you, ranking your wishes in the organization, but also make sure how it fits with the capacity that you have to be able to do so. Yes, there it is, step number 7. Ranking is key. So how does it look like? Let me show you a couple of records that you can have in your portfolio management. So what you see here, a number of wishes indicated on the left side, short description, main category, the name of the person who owns the idea, if it is strategy related, yes or no, an idea also from the financial point of view, priority, and also there you need to do your priority setting on enterprise level, and which result in a ranking. And that's what you see here. Ranking 1 up to 5 can be, for example, the input for the portfolio for 2023. And if you have more activities, more wishes on your portfolio mentioned, well, then you can put it in the portfolio for 2024. Then you can run it in a batch related to the capacity that you have for 2022, for 2023, and so on and so on. So it's all about creating a central place where you can collect ideas and wishes. And what I did here, if I zoom into one of these graphs, let me make it slightly bigger, you can even say, okay, so in 2022, 20% was reactive on the customer wish, results in new agreements. And our aim for example, 2025 is, let me move to this graph, is that we say we would like to have 20% proactive activities internally to do risk mitigation results in new agreements. So you can even create your own targets in the way that you would like to set and fill your portfolio. Let me conclude. We come to the end of this topic where we spoke about the 7 steps to demystify demand and portfolio management. I would like to thank you for listening, and for those that stay in the online session, they have the possibility to interact and ask questions, and there's a way to get access to the slides and the full checklist that I mentioned earlier. Okay, have a good evening, thank you, and see you next time.